meeting of the Oregon City Commission for April 2nd, 2014. Please stand and join me in the flag salute. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I've got a couple of proclamations to read this evening, and will be followed by presentations from individuals that are involved in the concerns of these proclamations. The first one: whereas Parkinson's thank you.
Paul's here.
Whereas Parkinson's disease is a chronic, progressive, and neurological disease and is the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the United States, whereas there is inadequate data on the incidence and prevalence of Parkinson's disease, but it is estimated to affect between 500,000 and 1.5 million people in the United States, and the prevalence will probably be more than double in 2040. Whereas Parkinson's disease is the 14th leading cause of death in the United States, according to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, and the age-adjusted rate increased 2.9% from 2010 to 2011. And whereas it is estimated that the economic burden of Parkinson's disease is at least $14.4 billion annually, including indirect costs to patients and family members of $6.3 billion. And whereas research suggests the cause of Parkinson's disease is a combination of genetic and environmental factors, but the exact cause and progression of the disease is still unknown. And whereas there is no objective test or biomarker for Parkinson's disease, and the rate of misdiagnosis can be high, and whereas the symptoms of Parkinson's disease vary from person to person and can include tremors, slowness of movement and rigidity, difficulty with balance, swallowing, chewing, and speaking, cognitive impairment and dementia, mood disorders such as depression and anxiety, constipation, skin problems, and sleep difficulties. And whereas there is no cure, therapy, or drug to slow or halt the progression of Parkinson's disease, and whereas local, regional, and state volunteers, researchers, and medical professionals are working to improve the quality of life of persons living with Parkinson's disease and their families, and whereas increased education and research is needed to find more effective treatments with fewer side effects and ultimately a cure for Parkinson's disease, therefore, I, Doug Newey, Mayor of Oregon City, hereby proclaim the month of April 2014 as Parkinson's Awareness Month, and I have signed this today, the second day of April 2014. I'd like to invite forward Mr. Kevin Mansfield to go ahead and speak to this particular issue and proclamation, if you would. She'll have a microphone. Oh, you can, speak directly there if you want to.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting me and letting me come today. I have Parkinson's disease. I've had it since officially diagnosed from 2001 on. I was unable to work anymore, so I needed to find out about information. When I went to the doctor, all they said is, "You have Parkinson's, come see me in 6 months." Not the thing to do, believe me. I'm a facilitator with Parkinson's Resources of Oregon that's based out of Lake Oswego. I've been with them for about 12 years as a facilitator, and I'm now also the Oregon State Director with Parkinson's Action Network based out of Washington, D.C., where I go around and I talk to besides educating people, I educate our 2 senators and our 5 representatives, which are all behind Parkinson's. Today, the Congress passed, again, for another year. We're very happy that they've made April National Parkinson's Month. We appreciate, on behalf of the Parkinson's community, Parkinson's Resources, and PAN, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for including Oregon City. As was mentioned, Parkinson's is a very expensive disease. part of what we do is, well, I was just back at Washington, D.C. last month, and I was asking for support for things like $32 billion for the National Institute of Health so that we can have research for Parkinson's. We was asking for $16 million for the Department of Defense, which I didn't know until the last couple of years when I became a member of PAN, that they also do a lot of research. Being there's approximately 80,000 veterans out there that have Parkinson's disease. We also tried to ask for, that did not pass Congress the last couple of days, for medical cap therapy to cut that, because as people with Parkinson's, we need continued support with medications, with care and stuff. And after a while, it gets expensive. Out of that money, last year, Oregon benefited by $304.6 million, went to OHSU for research here locally. They have a fantastic Parkinson's department on resources. And that also, even though we all suffered through the sequestration, we thought that was going to lose about 32,000 jobs. But with this funding that we were able to get, we were able to save 6,221 jobs. I left a brochure for each of you members for information further on PAN and what we do if you're interested. If anybody in the audience is interested, I left some brochures out in the hallway. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting me tonight and letting me speak my piece.
Does anybody have
Thank
any
you.
questions?
Thank you
Thank you
for
very
bringing
much.
that to our attention. I think it is a disease that does need to be addressed.
I do have
Thank
a
you.
couple of friends that have Parkinson's disease as well. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mr. Mansfield.
Excuse me, Mayor, you wanted a picture?
Oh, yes. Catch the flags on your side. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. I have a second proclamation to read. And that is important to all of us. Whereas child abuse and neglect is an ongoing tragedy, and whereas the effects of child abuse are felt by whole communities and need to be addressed by the entire community, and whereas effective child abuse intervention programs succeed because of partnerships created between the courts, social service agencies, schools, religious organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. And whereas all citizens should become more aware of child abuse and its prevention within the community and become involved in supporting parents to raise their children in a safe, nurturing environment. And whereas children are key to the City of Oregon City's future success, prosperity, and quality of life, and whereas children are our most valuable resource, they are also our most vulnerable. And whereas children have a right to be safe and to be provided an opportunity to thrive, learn, and grow. And whereas we must come together as partners to shine the light on child abuse so the voices of our children are heard by all, and we are as a community extending a helping hand to children and families in need. And whereas by providing a safe and nurturing environment for our children, free of violence, abuse, and neglect, we can assure Oregon City's children will grow to their full potential as the next generation of leaders, helping to secure the future of this city and the nation. Now, therefore, I, Doug Neely, Mayor of Oregon City, hereby proclaim the month of April 2014 as Child Abuse Prevention Month, and call upon all citizens to increase their participation in efforts to prevent child abuse and thereby strengthening the community in which they live.
Yeah, thanks.
And therefore, I've assigned this on the April 2nd, 2014. And I believe, Barbara, I'm going to try this. Peschiera, is that correct? Peschiera. One more time. Peschiera. And Catherine Burns to come forward, please.
Well, Mayor Neely and Commissioners, thank you very much for having us here this evening. My name is Barbara Peschiera. I'm Executive Director of Children's Center, and I'm joined tonight by Catherine Burns, who is a member of our Board of Directors. I have a short presentation to show you. Children's Center has been around for 10 years now. This is our 10th anniversary of serving children, and our mission has remained steady to support and medically assess children who are suspected victims of abuse or neglect. We see all forms of abuse and neglect at Children's Center: sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and there are 5 types of neglect. Carley's Law is unique to Oregon, where when there's a suspicious physical injury, a reporter or a provider needs to report that, and then that child needs to be seen within 48 hours by the designated medical clinic, which is Children's Center for Clackamas County. We provide a medical exam for every child who comes to the center, head to toe, and then we also offer that child an opportunity to do a recorded forensic interview that's later used in court proceedings. We also provide our families with support and referrals to connect them with healing, because they're really at a point of crisis when they come to our center, and we want to help them on that path towards healing, which is complicated. We also have a program called Risk Outreach, which is response to inappropriately sexualized kids. And these are children who are below the age of, and we don't want them in the system anyway, juvenile justice, but they are inappropriately touching other children. And so when we get reports of those concerns, we'll reach out to that family and try and intervene in that behavior before that progresses. We also have a support group for non-offending caregivers, and we do a lot of community education and outreach, which is why we're here tonight. We provide upwards of 500 assessments every year, and then we provide another 1,700 families with family support, outreach, and consultation. Sadly, most of the children who are referred for concerns of abuse are little girls, younger than the age of 7, and most of them are in our door because of sexual abuse concerns. We have a diverse base of funding. Our families are never charged for our services. That's part of our public mandate. We get about 17% of our funding from the state through a special fund that's for this sort of intervention that comes from crime fines, not taxes. We also receive a county grant. About 11% of our money comes from insurance reimbursement, so that if a family has insurance or is on Medicaid, we will file a claim. But nearly half of our budget comes from private sources, corporations, foundations, and individuals. Part of our message this month is to remind everybody about mandatory reporting. There is a very long list of professions, including your own, which are required by law to report when you have a feeling or a concern that something's wrong. And there are links in this presentation and on our website to the list of mandatory reporters. But we, of course, feel that all adults have a moral obligation to report something when they see a child that is in harm's way. Encourage you all to put the child abuse hotline phone number in your contacts, or write it down now. For Clackamas County, the hotline number is 971-673-7112. That is the start of the intervention. It's not going to happen until a report is made. There are concerns about reporting. It's not an easy thing for people to do. It takes a little bit of courage. But if you don't have, so these are kind of some of the questions that people give, the reasons that they don't report. You are not the investigator. Whatever information you have is going to be helpful because it triggers the investigators to do what they need to do. If the abuse happened a long time ago, we know that perpetrators have 20 to 40 victims. Serial perpetrators have hundreds. If they're still out there, there are still children in harm's way. And yes, you can report anonymously. The hotline will give a lot more credibility to calls where you do provide your name. It is very, very rare that an investigation, by the time it's finished, would actually include your initial report because there's so much evidence that comes after that. But this is an epidemic issue. Nearly 20 children are killed every year in Oregon as a result of abuse. 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday, and sadly, only 10% of abuse is reported. Children's Center launched a strategic plan last year, and we have 4 very simple goals. We want to see every child who needs our services. We want to do it with the highest quality that we can. We want to be well known and visible, and we want to be sustainable. We have a number of activities going on this month, a robust campaign at Clackamas Town Center where the child abuse hotline number is listed everywhere from the lamppost to the door clings all the way to the mirrors in the restrooms. It's really exciting to see that kind of support. City proclamations like tonight we're very grateful for. We're doing many speeches at service clubs. We have a training with Corey Jewel Jensen this Saturday at New Hope Community Church. She's a nationally known speaker who's worked with sex offenders and knows from their polygraph testimony how to keep our kids safe. We also have a training the following Saturday at Children's Center about a curriculum that's called Darkness to Light, which is wonderful for parents to learn how they can keep their children safe. We also have our luncheon. We're going to cap the month with our luncheon on April 30th. And this year we're really excited to have former NBA player Kenny Anderson as our speaker. He has a powerful story to tell. You can always visit our website if you'd like to volunteer or participate in any of these events.
And the luncheon is where?
At the Oregon Golf Club.
Okay.
And we'll get invites through the email.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll just add a few comments. Barbara really covered, I think, everything quite well. We do want to say thank you to you all. You are elected leaders. You are people who are tasked with the job of protecting the children and families in the Oregon City community. And I know that you're doing a good job with that work. And dealing with child abuse is part of that issue. The Children's Center has seen 46 children in the past year from Oregon City. We know that that's not nearly enough. We'd like to be seeing more. We don't want to see more, but
There's a lot
we
more
should
out
be.
there.
There's many more out there, as you
Not
can
being
see from
reported.
those statistics. And we know that more than 20 children are killed, die annually from the direct effects of child abuse or neglect. So it is an important issue, and we know that that you do see it as an important issue because you're declaring a proclamation on behalf of this issue tonight. The Children's Center, as she said, is ready to help. It's just located in a wonderful building just up by Willamette Falls Hospital. They're seeing there more than 500 children a year. I would like to just tell you that all of us need to speak out for the children. One case that we sometimes bring up is of a girl named Sarah, who, not her real name, but 14, recruited into sex trafficking after being abused for many years in her own home. Was dropped off at the mall to do her work. got up the courage and did go to a store clerk, and said, "Please call the police. I'm tired. I can't do this anymore." The clerk called, and she did get help. She was seen at the center. One of the things that she said is she really just hoped that she could live in a foster home and be able to go back to school. And I think all of us would feel sorry for her, but I think we need to do more than that. We really need to look at how can we be the voice for young people who are too young to have a voice, who are treated badly and need our help. And so that's the reason that we are here and that you are here too. So thank you for this proclamation, and we look forward to working with you more in the future.
Thank you for all your help you do for them.
Commissioner Pauley and Commissioner Smith and I were at the Good Morning Oregon City this morning. Commissioner's mom actually, I said Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, you
not
did.
Commissioner
I wasn't
Mumm.
there.
He wasn't there, but Commissioner Mumm was. And she had some comments that maybe not that many people are aware of the nature of the service. And you might want to
Sure,
repeat this.
sure. Before this center was formed, a child would have to give their story of abuse or neglect to 4 or 5 different agencies. And as you can well imagine, being an adult, to be abused or neglected and have to repeat your story to 4 or 5 different police agencies, the DA gets to hear it and all that. Part of the reason the center was formed was to bring the child to the location. All those other agencies to have a seat at the table at the center itself, so that it's videotaped and the child only has to repeat the story of abuse one time and not 4 or 5 times. Every time a child tells you an abusive story, it is traumatic for them, very traumatic. So if they only tell their story one time, then, you know, that is so much more, it's better for them as they begin the healing process. And the Children's Center does a lot for their healing process. I can't stress enough how important it is to have them in our community.
Thank you very much for your support.
And I recall when in fact the center was established before then, I believe they had to go to Multnomah County for that kind of processing, which of course was an additional burden. So, and I've noted your expansions. I believe you have 2 interview rooms now, or am I correct? So you've gone through the expansions to give better service, and I want to compliment everybody that's been involved in getting that program here to begin with, but also the continued commitment to do the needed expansions you had. I'm sure there are additional needs that you'll be trying to address, but really appreciate your coming out here and talking about the program. Thank you much.
I think we all
Thank
wish
you
there
for the
wouldn't be
partnership.
more needs, but we all know that child abuse has been hidden away in closets for many years.
Yes, and now it's easy to report. There's one number to call. Before, people didn't know,
Yes.
what to do. Now there is a one number to call, and everybody needs to report. It's our duty.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I gave you each a
Yes.
postcard that has the number, as well as...
And our little pinwheel.
Yes, and Pinwheel is the national sign of child abuse prevention, so we've been distributing these. Many of the children who will be seeing the Easter Bunny at the mall will be leaving with pinwheels, and it has the hotline number on it also. So if you need any more materials, please let me know. These postcards are in English and Spanish, and we just really, really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
good
you
to
so
see you
much.
Thank
twice
you.
in one day.
Oh, yeah. Great to see you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to have Scott Archer introduce somebody from Metro, I believe, to talk about the Newell Creek planning
Yes,
process.
thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. We have here tonight Jim Desmond and Dave Elkin from Metro, who are making their way up to the speaker's table. And they're going to give you a report on the planning efforts that are getting underway for the Newell Creek Canyon.
Mayor Neely, members of the Commission, Jim Desmond. I'm the Director of the Sustainability Center at Metro and oversee our natural area work. We're excited to be here tonight to give you a preview and a little bit of an outline of the effort that will go on to begin to plan and develop public access for the first time to the Newell Creek Canyon. And in many ways, Newell Creek Canyon, it tells the story of Metro's natural area work over the last 15 years. We've been acquiring a number of properties there and have assembled now more than 300 acres that are continuous, which in an urban context, inside the urban growth boundary, is remarkable. It's one of our great success stories in the region. Because of the generosity of the regional voters, we've invested more than $6 million in acquisitions there. And then slowly but steadily through that time, we've also been taking on some restoration efforts, trying to remove exotics, which is a battle there. There's an extensive, as you know, those of you who've been down there by it, ivy problem, and very typical of these sort of natural areas in the region. But we spent about $200,000 in the last 5 years in restoration efforts, about half of which was funding through Metro, and the other half was through the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. And we've worked in partnership with a lot of folks there. As you also know, the voters passed a levy, an operating levy last year, a 5-year levy, and one of the things that we're going to do besides focusing on restoration of natural areas is there are a few places in the region where we wanted to develop new public access, and Newell Creek was selected as the place to go first. There are a couple of reasons for that. The strong partnerships that exist with the city. The Oregon City and Metro have been great partners on a number of things, so we knew it was a place where we were both welcome and had a high likelihood of success. The college there, the John Inkeep Learning Center, we've had the Watershed Council. There have been a lot of things happening at Newell for years that we knew we could build on that success, and it seemed a great place to start. And also, to be candid, the fact that there has not been organized public access there has led to some unauthorized and less than ideal uses, and we feel that through a proper development and signage and parking and bathrooms and or any of that sort of thing that would happen there, we can begin to create proper use and decrease some things that are both not safe for the public and not great for the natural resources. So before I introduce Dave, who's our project manager here, I just want to thank all of you and thank Mayor Neely in particular, who came out recently on a tree planting that we had there and some restoration work. We had 35 people come out and plant 700 plants recently, and we've already had a couple of site tours that drew more than 70 people come out. So we know there's a high interest in this already. And our goal here is to, will always be with the Metro Natural Areas Bond, our first responsibility is to preserve the natural resources. That's really what this program's about. But that is not incompatible with public access and public use, and doing it the right way that will create a great experience for the people that come out, environmental ed opportunities, while preserving those natural resources is what we're about. I'm pleased to introduce Dave Elkin, who will be the project manager here, and will be the person who will lead this. Dave is new to Metro. It was a really exciting hire for us. Dave is a landscape architect who was with the Greenworks firm, private sector firm here for the last 12 years. They're one of the top firms not only in the state, but recognized in the states around here. They work at a national level, particularly in the western U.S. Dave's worked on a number of projects like this, brings a high level of expertise. I'm going to have Dave walk you through the process that we're going to lay out over the next few months to engage the public and figure out the best way to develop public access there.
Thanks, Jim. Mayor, members of the commission. Hi, Dave Elkin. Nice to be here tonight, and very excited to be talking a little bit about Newell. So I've been tasked with really, in the short term, taking this project from the restoration work that's already occurred, all of the bond measures that have happened in 96 and 2000, or 1995 and 2006, and go from now, from the present time, into the end of the year and produce a comprehensive plan for the access into Newell Creek Canyon. And the way we're going to go about that is through 4 public meetings. It's going to be April 29th is the first one, Pioneer Community Center, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. We'll be doing a bunch of advertising and some mailers to make sure we get a lot of people out. And then we're going to do another one in June, one in August, and then the last one is going to be in October. And the intent of those meetings is really just to bring the public along. First one is going to be a listening session, hear what people sort of experiences they want to have in Newell. what sort of memories they might have had as a child playing, catching crawdads, that type of thing within Newell Creek. And then also beginning to talk a little bit about what's important for them, not only for their neighborhood, but in their community, that Newell might be able to provide. So then the second meeting is really going to be what we heard, a little recap. These are all the things that we heard from the public. Third one being bringing some draft options so we can discuss what some of those options might be. Then the fourth and final one there in October to say this is what we believe is the draft comprehensive plan for Newell Creek Canyon, get some approval from everybody, and move forward with that for the implementation of that. Big picture is that once the comprehensive plan is complete, we're going to move into some construction drawings over time, design and construction drawings mostly through 2015, with then construction beginning hopefully late 2015 and into the spring and early summer of 2016. So in addition to the public meetings, we're also going to be having a stakeholder committee that I'm collecting a number of members from the community, representatives of neighborhood organizations, Greater Oregon City Watershed Council, and a lot of other various organizations to get a group together that we believe we can bring ideas from these public meetings, bring it to the stakeholder committee, get a good review, get some good thought in on what sort of ideas we should be moving forward with. Then we're going to have 3 stakeholder committee meetings prior to all the next public meetings. Make sure we have a good process there. And then also I've just been connecting with a lot of local community groups. So I've been out at the Hillendale Neighborhood Association last night. Nice to see you again, Mayor. And Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. And then I'm going to be heading to the Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association next week. So there's a lot more meetings coming up that I'll be attending, I should say. One thing I want to touch on a little bit is just the personality of Newell. And there's a beautiful historic forest and habitat that was once there. Obviously, it was logged a few times, but grand fir, western red fir, and big leaf maple are really the kind of primary species that are out there. But it's home to steelhead, cutthroat, rainbow trout, but also brook lamprey eels, Pacific lamprey, and coho. And you might have heard about the lamprey and Willamette Falls, that connection there. Well, some of those lamprey come up then in Newell Creek and hang out in the lower reaches of that. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. Not the most beautiful animal in the world, but but still necessary.
I agree with you.
Something likes them, otherwise we wouldn't have lampreys.
Absolutely. No, you're right. That's so true. And then there's been 10 beaver dams that have been documented as well along Newell Creek. So very, very active habitat, and hence the protection of that natural resource. But I think the real personality comes out when we start talking about Newell Creek's geology. Yeah. And that's where there's very interesting geology. Many of you know there's the Columbia River basalts that is really the foundation for most of Oregon, or at least this area of Oregon. And then there's a beautiful Troutdale Formation that was a silt clay that was deposited on top of all of that. Then on top of that, we had the boring lava cap, really, that flowed across our local area. And Newell has really faulted, and over time, Missoula floods came in and carved out this big, beautiful canyon. So really, it's kind of the Neapolitan ice cream of Oregon City right now. You can see all of these beautiful formations right there within the canyon. And I think that's the uniqueness. And of course, there's landslides because of that unique geology, but also, there's some celebration there that I think really could occur about beginning to study it. So we've reached out to Bill Burns, who did his PhD on Newell Creek Canyon, documenting landslides. Many of you know he's going to be presenting on May 6th, I think, Clackamas County, with his study there in the Northwest Clackamas County landslide susceptibility analysis that he's doing. So we're bringing him into the project. But just to finish up, the intent overall is really to understand people's visitor experience that they want to have in Newell. And we want to take those ideas, take the science and stewardship that we know about the site, and make sure that we provide a balanced, overall, comprehensive plan for the future of Newell Creek Canyon. And the intent really is when we talk about access, we immediately start talking about trails and pathways and widths and material types. But what we want to do is make sure that we're expanding the conversation to not only these facilities that are there, but also possible education, Clackamas Community College, the high school curriculum, tours that people might want to do, and begin to talk a little bit about what are the things that we could expand within the community that would also not just be these facilities that are going to be there, but then embed the canyon within the community to make sure that we're fostering stewardship for decades to come. And that's really the intent and the overall vision of the comprehensive plan as we move forward. So I brought a big stack of the Big Backyard, our brand new quarterly magazine that Metro's putting out, and Newell is on the cover. We're very proud of that, and just show that our commitment and enthusiasm for this project.
I'm going to say the person on the cover, although I think on the cover you see her from the back, but
Yeah,
you can go inside and see her from the front, was the organizer of the Friends of Newell Creek. It was in the, I'd say the early 1990s when a lot of development was occurring down there with its steep slopes and so forth. A lot of people don't know it. The reason I ran for city commission in 1994 was I was a member of Friends of Newell Creek, and we wanted to change the steep slopes ordinances, which we did. We actively look at them periodically and see improvements and make them again. But you were instrumental actually in procuring properties from developers that would have ended up in disasters.
Yes.
Yeah.
We lost 2 apartment buildings down there because of slides. I don't know how many houses. I know of at least 2, and others that have been severely damaged because of slides. And it was an area that should never have been built upon. But you're because of the passing of the bond measure, yours actually was a savior to some of those properties out there, and we really appreciate it. And I'm glad we're progressing on and making it a rural part of our urban landscape, that an area that people can go and enjoy nature. We had, in the time, part of the time our library was leasing there at Danielson's, we had the Carnegie Center functioning in many ways, partially as an art exhibit, but also we had a children's museum down below, and I would periodically collect animals to show kids. And in Newell Creek Canyon, I found 5 of the 7 salamanders that I'm aware of in this area. And it's rich, and if you turn over a few leaves and a few logs and put them back after you turn them over, you can actually see how rich that habitat is in many, many ways. So we're pleased that you are such great partners, not only in the areas of Newell Creek Canyon and also Kanema Bluffs, but also in really helping us in terms of our urban growth expansion, providing money through the tax that you collect. The excise tax, construction excise tax, that has enabled us to do some of the long-term planning we have to do in the areas that come into the city, and to do it in a mechanism that we can continue to preserve the rural areas around us. And you've been great partners in that regard, and we really value that partnership.
And I assume it goes without saying, we'll work very closely with Mr. Archer, and other staff here will be obviously a key stakeholder. They know your community well. They're obviously park experts, and while this is a Metro site, we'll rely on we'll really seek input from the staff, and of course all of you. So along the process, if there's things that you want to convey to us, I assume it goes without saying that we certainly want to hear from you. You would be prime stakeholders here for us.
And we did talk about, I forgot to mention the scheduling of a tour that we want to do with you all.
Yes.
Specifically for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
we wanted to take a tour. Thank you.
So I'm on it.
I think within 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 days after Blue Heron declared bankruptcy, Jim and I were sitting together, looking at that great asset of Willamette Falls and so forth, and we've been able to develop partnerships based on that too. I want to thank you for that active participation, Jim, on your part to move as quickly as you could in that area, and you've been a great partner there.
We're having a little fun there too.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Anybody
Thank you.
Questions? Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say thank you for your partnership, and I'm really looking forward to our citizens enjoying that area. It's one of the many things that make Oregon City unique.
Yes.
So it's an amazing piece of property. and resource.
And it's another hidden gem. There's a lot of
Yes.
kids. A lot of kids in your community have never been down there. They've never been able to experience that kind of creek and
You're right.
salamanders and coho and that people don't know what's there. It's in a way it's like Willamette Falls in that sense. It's there and it's not there. And so we hope that through these processes that we're working on, we can really, and I think we'll build a stronger community when your citizens and other citizens of the region have access to these places while we continue to improve the habitat values and most importantly the water quality in Newell Creek, which is really what this is all about.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now is the time we move into public comments. Try to confine ourselves to no more than 3 minutes, unless it's really important. Sometimes we go longer. I have two people coming together. I'm going to do this and bring Dave Elkins and William Gifford first. And oh, that was Dave Elkins. Excuse me. That was Dave Elkins. Rolla and Marge Harding, please come forward.
Yeah. Funny. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you.
What a gentleman.
Oh, you notice that we're underdressed tonight. Instead of.
Hopefully you didn't want to embarrass you.
You, I get
The old Thank you for not embarrassing us.
This is Marge and Rolla Harding. We this evening are representing the First City ambassadors. Statement I want to read. This is in conjunction with our conversation on Monday in regards to representation. We, as representatives of the First City ambassadors, come before you this evening to request your approval for the ambassadors to be recognized as heritage representatives of the City of Oregon City at events and special occasions. This request is based on our conversations Monday with the Oregon City Civic Improvement Trust Committee. If the Commission feels it would be appropriate to do so at this time, it would be appreciated. Because the summer tourism season is fast approaching, there are several opportunities for the First City ambassadors to participate in welcoming and promoting of our city. So basically, that's our question. There was some question at the meeting on Monday if we had any connection with the city or had asked the city's permission to imply that we are representatives of the city. The wording is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So we wanted to be sure by coming this evening that we clear up that and ask for your permission to be so involved.
Well, I don't know. You want me to start?
You can go ahead. My understanding is you're looking for ambassadors basically to go over to various events and represent essentially the history as a living history.
history and the heritage of Oregon City. And the ambassadors would always have two identifying characteristics. One is period dress. That's why we dress this way again tonight. And the other is the cockade, the ribbon identifier, which is a historic or very period style of ribbon, like we're wearing tonight. It would say First City Ambassadors, and then it would have the individual's name on that. And then the idea at this point is the person would be able to not only talk about the activity that is happening right then, but to be able to tell information particularly, now, and this may get a little technical, but if we're dressed in the 1840s, we should be able to say a little something about the 1840s, 50s, 60s, whatever it is. And there will be ways that they can have crypt notes to help, but anyone can do this. This is not a closed club. And we have a number of people already that have said, oh, I would really like to do this. I would like to help represent Oregon City and welcome the visitors here. So they'll go home and say, we really want to go back to Oregon City and help develop that tourism part. So that's-
Promotion is a big part of
Is the whole
what we're
purpose.
trying to accomplish. So, anyway, that's our request.
And-
So,
And what I'm going to do is make a request of David Frazier as to who's the best staff person for them to work on this official recognition on our part.
Well, since tonight's the first time I
Yeah.
learned about this, I haven't had a lot of time to think about it. But one of the concern, I think the thing to do would, if the commission, if this sounds appealing to you, to have a representative of some sort. There's always this legal concern about creating an agent of the city, which
Right.
which creates
Right.
liabilities
That's
for
what we're
lots of
trying
people.
to avoid.
Right.
Yeah. So that's
So I would suggest that you just simply ask these folks, if you're inclined to do this, have them work with my office, and we will figure out which department they should work with. And then I think the city attorney can probably craft a letter that allows them to do these certain limited activities without creating them as an agent of the city, and that would be our goal.
Yeah,
it would be primarily the heritage part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's,
fine.
that's what we're representing.
and I have some information I will leave with you if you're interested in any further information about it.
About
I'm going to get David's ear here a minute. I'm concerned about too, because Margin Rollo we all know and we all love, but
oh no.
future generations coming on, I
Yes.
would like to make sure that we're not getting.
It would be an
somebody else-
individual,
Yeah.
an individual assignment, not
Right.
not a blanket thing.
When you say
That would be good.
anybody can be involved, but anybody who wants to be involved is, I presume, going to go through some kind of a training.
Through
Yeah.
the
Yes.
And
process.
some kind of a vetting process.
That's exactly, yes. And the Oregon City Heritage Coordinating Committee is the umbrella organization for this. We do the spirits and cemetery walks and so on. So they're the umbrella organization for this. And I don't know if that means anything, but we'll do whatever we need to
And you'll be
do to
working
make
with-
it work.
Within our various
Just wanna be
bodies that
sure.
have museums represented in the
Yes,
city.
yes, and
all of
that's
Yes.
the bottom line.
that. Right.
And I think you're going to need to dress up a bit.
We can't
Now
wait.
you tell. That's right.
Sunny day
I
today.
appreciate the fact that you removed your hat on this time around.
Yes. Well,
But he did wear his period glasses.
Yes,
so-
Yeah.
Can you
I
see through?
barely
Can you see? Yeah.
I'm sure you were there somewhere.
well, I think coming before us does two things. One is, saying that you're out there doing that and representing, that you're saying that you're representing Oregon City, and Oregon City has said, yes, do that. And the other is, it brings exposure to what you are doing, and people on the camera and in the audience could sign up and dress in period costumes and become ambassadors for our city. So thank you guys for
Thank
doing
you.
that.
I was just going to say there are other communities that do this. For instance, Portland Rosarians,
Yeah.
Astoria, the Living Historians, and so on. So that there are communities. that
Thank
do it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. William Gifford.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. Haven't seen y'all in a while. Just thinking of some things that I probably ought to talk about, but
You got 3 minutes to do it.
thanks for reminding me. One just came to mind as I was listening to the presentation of the Children's Center, and I just looked at our city website, and we don't have that child abuse hotline that I could see anywhere on our website. We have,
that's a good
if you
catch.
drill down to the police page, we have the non-emergency number. But it seems to me as though that would be an appropriate thing for us to have if we're serious about facilitating the public's use of that of that facility. I'd recommend that. Also, piggybacking on Metro's presentation, I was curious this morning when 3 very large trucks rolled down our little cul-de-sac, our dead-end street, which borders Newell Creek Canyon, and with Multnomah County Sheriff badge on the side of it. And I, well, that's kind of peculiar. So, being a nosy guy, I nosed down there and talked to the sheriff, who was all dressed up in his bulletproof vest, and what's going on down here? And they were finishing up some cleanup sites of the some of the homeless camps that they had found down there. And apparently they have inmate crews that work and clean that up. I said, what are you doing over here? And he said that they are on contract to Metro. Of course, Metro doesn't see the county boundaries as others do. And so I thought that was an interesting piece that they are down there. And their trucks have RID on the side of them, which I had to look a little more closely and got a picture of it. It's the Regional Illegal Dumping Patrol, RID, and they have their little logo. It says RID, Report Illegal Dumping. So I thought that was very interesting. They said that they found all sorts of things, including syringes. And other unpleasantries. But the main reason that I wanted to make a mention tonight is that apparently on the news about a month ago or so, that's how long it's been since I've seen you, there was a tidbit about the city of Eugene passing the first ban in the state of insecticides that kill honeybees.
Oh.
And I mentioned this to my wife, Joyce, and she said, boy, wouldn't you think that would be a no-brainer? And so I would entreat the commission to direct our staff, whoever would be appropriate, to look into what would it take for us to instigate a similar ordinance. Maybe we can do some research and see exactly what Eugene did to that. But to me, honeybees are the vital link between us and our food production. Without them, I think we're not long for this world, and so it seems to me, even if it's a token step, that we could make a statement and say, yes, we agree that we should not be killing off our honeybees.
That's right. Well, we had a tremendous bumblebee kill in this area that was Woodburn. That's right.
Right.
I pressed bumblebees. You may not know it, but the honeybee was introduced to the Americas.
I'm not saying it's an indigenous species. I'm just saying it's a
very
very productive.
But what we ought to do is we call it an indicator species and save all our bees.
Yeah, exactly. The canary in the well, or the mine shaft.
Well,
so,
thank you.
Anyway, I just want to bring that to your attention and would ask that you, if you'd consider directing staff to consider doing something about the honeybees.
Perfect. Thank you.
Who would be our honeybee person?
I think John Lois over there.
Who would be our honeybee person?
I made no eye contact.
I saw you shaking your head. I thought you were volunteering.
Heritage bees. Heritage bees are the ones we're looking for.
Heritage bees.
Oh, I think we could give it to
I think we should choose somebody sweet so we can give it to the city recorder.
She's like,
she's ignoring me.
She's got her head down too.
No, that's a good thought.
That is.
It might be something that we could put forward. Well, yeah, it's maybe to some consideration for the Natural Resource Committee.
I love it. I don't think you have enough to do over there, Tony.
Anyway.
Busy bees.
With that, we'll go to Blaine Meyer and Adam Bykowski. Is that correct? I was close.
Not a cow and not a cough.
Okay. How's everyone tonight?
Good.
Doing well.
How are you, Blaine?
Good. Thanks. Just wanted to let you know that I'm the chair of the Clackamas County Ped and Bikeway Advisory Committee, and also the on the Transportation Advisory Committee here in Oregon City, and co-founder of the Oregon City Business Alliance, and founder of the Oregon City Trail Alliance. So I'm the humble treasurer for that organization.
Maybe you could take on the bees too. Huh? I think you
There
have enough to do.
But I also own First City Cycles on Main Street, and so very active in outdoor activities and cycling. And so I just want to applaud, first of all, Jim and Dave coming here tonight and talking about Newell Creek Canyon. It's awesome. And I really look forward to being supportive of their efforts and really embrace the public process. So, but the Oregon City Trail Alliance is committed to hiking and biking, and so we're obviously going to advocate for a trail system in the canyon, if that's at all possible, if it's geologically feasible. But we'd really like to see that go forward. We embrace the values that Dave and Jim have talked about of preservation and protection and even repair. The Oregon State Trail Alliance has led 4 hikes down into the canyon, tried to do some consensus building with the college. We have folks who are interested in starting a curriculum, so we're talking about maybe an outdoor activity curriculum there at Clackamas Community College. And so, we're trying to do our part and, coordinate with everybody else as to, how we can do exactly what Dave was talking about in terms of Newell Creek Canyon can really become a kind of a living lab, if you will, for nature study, environmental protection, and also trail building, outdoor activities. So we're excited about that possibility. Another thing that I was recently in Washington, D.C. with the bicycle lobby and had a great experience. But one of the things I was sitting in whose office was it? I think it wasn't Schrader's. Maybe it doesn't matter. But I was sitting there and I met a fellow who is part of the medical lobby. And he says, so you're with the bicycle lobby? And I said, yeah, I am. And he says, you folks need to really start banging the drum, because 1/3 of our youth in the United States are obese. And diabetes among youth is skyrocketing. He says, you really need to do whatever you can do to get kids active. So that's what we see Newell Creek as a blank slate. One, obviously the natural area and environmental issues, that's an awesome living laboratory, in education, but also a way to get kids, youth, and adults active, out hiking, out biking, and getting off the couch and out from behind the video machine. And then also, I think that, as a business person, I see a lot of opportunities for Oregon City and Clackamas County to really capitalize on the cyclotourism. This could be a huge boon for our area. And contrary to a lot of preconceptions or prejudices, I might say, the cycling community, I'm not a mountain biker, I'm a hiker, but my eyesight's not good enough. I can't judge the distance. But I really see the benefit of this for tourism and for economic dollars here in Oregon City. Mm-hmm. So, that may or may not end up playing out, but, in terms of the public process, but I really, really hope that it does. And, trail systems can be built that are environmentally sensitive and protective as well. So just want to submit that and encourage the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to touch on some of the points that Blaine made. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Adam Baykovsky. I'm the manager of First City Cycles. I'm also the president of the Oregon City Trail Alliance, and I'm an avid Newell Creek Canyon adventurer, I would say, as well. I've been in there many times. My back door is right into the canyon out near the hospital, and so I've been in there many a times. And, I'm really excited that Metro A has come and presented to you guys and shown, really now in the last, year or so, a lot more excitement and energy in putting some resources into opening up public access. I think the best advocacy for the environment is access. If people get out there and see it and enjoy it and it becomes a part of what they love, like what it has done for me, and I'm sure Mayor Neely's been involved. I saw you at the tree planting that they did out there. I really see it opening up to the community and saying, hey, look at this great resources. It's out our back door. It's not hidden in a closet anymore. Let's get it out and show it to, the community, get the youth excited. Like Blaine mentioned, the Clackamas Community College, maybe even developing curriculum that helps stewardship within the canyon. And also, the future for Oregon City as maybe a booming tourist destination. We're putting a lot of resources into developing the Willamette Falls Heritage Site, that could be a potential huge benefit, not only tourism-wise, but also just, putting Oregon City on the map a little more. And also, if we could, embrace cycle tourism, as Blaine said, it really could be something really phenomenal here in our area and bring in a lot of outside dollars to a much-needed area, And one thing I want to mention is Sandy Ridge Trail System up in the Mount Hood National Forest up on BLM land. There is an excellent example of where, they put the resources, the time, and the research into doing it right, doing it in a way where the environment is not harmed or hindered. It is actually, encouraged and advanced in a lot of ways, and they help the water runoff and, prevent a lot of damage and do a lot of, invasive species removal and that sort of thing. And that's what I'd really like to see in Newell Creek Canyon. And if possible, some awesome mountain bike trails, that would be great. But if not possible, some great hiking trails, just anything that's going to get us in there and, get our community to embrace it, as this great resource that it already is. So I just wanted to make that mention. So.
Thank you guys
Thank
for
you
all
for
you
coming
do.
out.
Yeah, and I'll mention one other thing. There is also on most on the regional trail system, projections, or there is a commuter path which would go from basically down the Abernathy, get across 213, and then go up to Ogden Middle School, and then it'd be a multi-use, most likely a paved path, but that's on the radar of a couple of different organizations, including Metro. So, that hopefully that'll come together.
And more potential dollars there as well as anything transportation oriented.
A fair amount of foresight on that. That's part of the regional trail system plan, extending actually all the way to Beaver Lake off of the Nursey Road.
Yes. Yeah. That'd be pretty exciting. We actually walked part of that, and it's neat to go, and you can just see about a half a mile, quarter mile, just straight as an arrow.
Rail bed and all
that.
Yeah.
No rails, of course. But
of course, yes.
Pretty cool, though.
Yeah. Thanks,
you
guys.
gentlemen. I appreciate you coming up. With that, is there anything anybody wishes to pull from the consent agenda?
Just the added item.
We're going to add an item, and we're going to have a resolution coming forward. What is the best point of introducing the resolution?
Mayor, I would suggest that you amend your agenda and add the resolution, and then you deal with the resolution under the manager's reports.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody agreed?
Yes.
Okay, very good. With that, I'll get out of the consent agenda, and we're entering our public hearing. Something that was continued from last time, ordinance for introduction, N14-1005, declaring a no. That was not on our last one, but we're doing a new ordinance here, introducing Measure 14-1005, declaring a moratorium on medical marijuana facilities and declaring emergency. We don't permit them anyway, but David Frazier will explain why we would care to have this also.
Captain Fryette's here to make a presentation tonight on behalf of the chief of police.
Were you just unaware of that?
Yes. That's a little bit of a setup, but no, the city attorney actually has this one. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, this comes to you as the result of legislation by the short session in 2014. I think you may have been following it. Basically, there's been a conflict between the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act and the Controlled Substances Act of the federal government. And dealing with that has taken an inordinate amount of legislative time, and the legislature punted the matter. So let me give you some background and tell you why we're faced with an ordinance like this, or basically doing nothing, because those are really the two choices before you. When the act was passed, it gave immunity to people who were implementing the act and were registered dispensers. There was a perceived conflict between that immunity and the land use and other regulation of dispensaries. The folks who ran the dispensaries claimed that the immunity preempted local land use and other regulations, and that only getting the state license was necessary. And in fact, there was a legislative council opinion in November of last year which said that local governments could not preempt the Medical Marijuana Act, notwithstanding the Controlled Substances Act. That was a controversial opinion. It may well be wrong, but it set up the short session to try to deal with that. As part of the background of this, the short session, there was an initiative petition threatened and filed to deal with allowing for recreational use of marijuana beyond the medical marijuana bill that had been passed. The legislature was asked by many people to do something, many different things in fact, by the advocates for recreational marijuana to allow it outright and to have the least number of restrictions, by opponents, of course, to stand with the Controlled Substances Act and not have any inconsistent state law with that act. And the legislature moved back and forth and eventually in early March of this year decided that it would do nothing really right now. So in effect, allowing the voters to deal with the issue of recreational marijuana. And in response to a number of local governments, and particularly those represented by the League of Oregon Cities, the legislature said, we'll give you time to deal with this at the local level, so that if you wish to enact a moratorium on dispensaries, you can do that. If there were no moratorium in place, then cities could undertake reasonable time, place, and manner regulations, but they couldn't ban medical marijuana dispensaries. In order to do this, remember the special session only ended in March. The governor just signed the bill. The health division had to adopt rules, and the rules even now change the form of the ordinance that was initially posted. So we have a new section 6, which if you go through this, I'll have to read separately. But the marijuana dispensary moratorium would only be effective through May 1 of next year. And the city recorder is tasked with sending notice of the adoption of the ordinance to the state. The ordinance has to be adopted fairly quickly, and that's why you have an emergency clause on the ordinance. And what it does is just effectively deal with the moratorium issue. I will say there's been a second legislative council opinion, if this weren't confusing enough, which slightly says that it's okay to adopt restrictions, but it's a fairly nuanced way. They endorse more or less the moratorium approach that's taken, but it still calls into question the strategy the city has dealt with over the last year and a half, which is to deal with this both as a land use matter and as a business license matter. Those who oppose any regulation will find something to hate in the business license ordinance and will probably challenge it. So what you have before you is the existing business license ordinance, but also this moratorium, which is by the recent legislation the exclusive vehicle for dealing with the moratorium. The provisions of the ordinance are fairly simple. You have them before you. And again, I will have to read Section 6 if you choose to go through a first reading, and I'll be thrilled to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
My question is, you touched on it just briefly, is why we're declaring an emergency. You said a brief time period. What is that brief time period?
The time period has to be done by the 1st of May of this year.
I thought you said next year.
No, well, it lasts until...
It goes until...
It's a year-long one.
Thanks.
Yep.
In one sense, because I've never got any indication from any commissioner here that they really want medical marijuana dispensaries in here, and every indication, every time it's come up, we've supported both the land use restrictions and the business license restrictions. We're just essentially kicking the can down the road.
Well,
And maybe something could happen.
The legislature's doing that as well. And it may well be that if one form or another of the initiative passes, there'll be no barriers at all, or there may be barriers built into whatever adopted.
Mr. Mayor, I did talk to the city attorney's office before we advanced this onto your agenda to confirm, and I guess I should do that now, that the preemption argument upon which you have based your ban previously, this isn't affected by that. It doesn't strengthen or lessen the effectiveness of that.
That's correct.
And regardless of what the legislature would do, unless Congress does something to change the Controlled Substances Act, that preemption argument will remain there and probably remain a valid argument, or at least viable to argue about. And that might even be the case regardless of a voter initiative. So I think that's all kind of unsettled, uncharted, and so there are many roads ahead on this one, but this is just another tool for you.
And again, the manager's entirely correct. The problem that I see is the two legislative council opinions, which basically say the Medical Marijuana Act preempts all local regulations. And again, the second one allows for some restrictions, but that's where the conflict occurs.
I think Milwaukee has just recently passed basically a ban itself. There are other cities that have done so.
Yeah.
I think this has been passing through the League of Oregon Cities.
Right.
A number of us have looked at the draft ordinance, and this is the result of it.
Yeah.
I think what it does, perhaps, is by the cities that wish to have this restriction, to maybe strategize a little bit over the next year without much concern of them being challenged in the process if they adopt some of the ordinances.
And I think there will be a form ordinance. I think what you have before you is, as I said, this has changed since the weekend when it was filed because of the new rules adopted by the Health Division.
Yep.
Yeah.
Commission here has been much more consistent.
Do we have a copy of that ordinance before us at this point?
We do have the revised ordinance.
Oh, it's on the bottom.
Oh, on the
It's
screen,
bottom.
okay. Yeah, very good.
I'm sorry, did you mention about the change to the ordinance?
I did.
I'm
That's
sorry, I
section
missed
6.
it.
And that'll be coming before us in the manager's report. Very good.
Yeah.
No, that's a different issue. The resolution that you have has to do with a different matter.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you
oh,
look
that's right. Never mind. Excuse me. Okay. Here we are. It is before us, and take a look. Have it before us where we can see it. We've all viewed this already. Do we? Anyone want to hear put a motion in for this ordinance?
We do have somebody signed up.
Please come forward. Corey Castle and I'll take Kathy Roth first.
No, I'm not there.
You're not there.
Well, it looks like you're there.
Now
Now
she's
you're
not.
not. You magically disappeared.
There's
Corey
one.
Castle?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really confusing subject. Yeah, basically it's so confusing. Like, what do you even really do? Like, you can listen to the state legislator and follow their plan, but you get local and it's a different plan. It's like, it's just getting really annoying at this point over all the years. But I think I got something because I know we can have a moratorium for a year, and I know the commission came up with like reasonable regulations on how to operate a dispensary in our city. So anyways, I wrote some stuff down. My name is Corey Gassel. I'm an Oregon City resident. I'd like to start off by saying that the legalization of cannabis is inevitable. It could even be legalized in the state of Oregon this year, but we'll leave that conversation for another day. Today we are considering whether to have a moratorium on medical cannabis dispensaries or to allow medical cannabis dispensaries, or how to reasonably regulate medical cannabis in our community. I am in favor of reasonably regulating cannabis in our community. I'm also in favor of a moratorium against HB 3460. There are items in HB 3460 that I'm for, like immunity for employees in the medical cannabis trade. There are also items in HB 3460 I'm against. The main thing that I don't like about HB 3460 is it doesn't put the patients first. For example, 3460 bans deliveries. I have two things to say about that. If a patient is sick or in pain, isn't a home delivery the right thing to do? If a patient doesn't have a car and is immobile, a home delivery is critical for patient satisfaction. The process of a home delivery is the equivalent of a hospice going to someone's house for health care. Second, home deliveries seem like a perfect area for compromise for people who don't want to see MMJ dispensaries in our community. A home delivery is not even noticeable. Deliveries to patients should not be banned. In our modern world, we want everything delivered to us. It's what people want. Amazon.com makes billions of dollars delivering goods to people because of the demand for home delivery. Another reason I'm for a moratorium is recently some people in the government introduced legislation to ban medibles. I don't want anything to do with people who think banning medibles is the right choice for medical marijuana patients. Ingesting cannabis is the most medicinally beneficial way to take cannabis. Smoking cannabis alleviates symptoms. Ingesting cannabis can cure inflictions. I recommend everyone ingest cannabis. Most people just choose to smoke it. There's never been a recorded death from the use of cannabis, so why do we feel the need to hyper-regulate it? This is one of the biggest and most talked about problems in our society today, over-regulation. And HB 3460 is par for the over-regulatory epidemic. The testing requirements in HB 3460 are overkill. I'd compare it to using a nuclear bomb to kill an ant. HB 3460 is a stepping stone to massive overregulation that will drive prices higher and that will create a demand for cheaper cannabis on the black market, which people will still use if the price is cheaper than over-regulated dispensaries. For example, 3.5 grams of cannabis in Colorado sells at an over-regulated dispensary for $60, but on the black market, that same 3.5 grams will be sold for $25. That is a significant price difference. I mean, after the novelty of dispensaries wears off and people are kind of over it after a year or two, they're just going to try to find the cheapest, way to get their medicine. And, there's plenty of people that have medical cards that can grow it. So, also in Colorado, they require RFID tags for every plant. One dispensary spent $19,000 on RFID tags. It just seems like a big waste of money. They are also required to be live monitored by camera 24 hours a day by the government in their grows. Coloradans were so desperate to legalize cannabis, they surrendered their right to privacy. In Washington State, the Liquor Control Board tried to throw out the entire medical cannabis program just so people would have to buy the expensive government-regulated cannabis. Fortunately, the people of Washington stood up and spoke out against such nonsense. I think taking it slow and developing our own system in Oregon is the way to go. HB 3460 was passed too quickly and it needs to be rewritten. Just to wrap it up, I feel the best area for compromise between patients, community, and government would be to allow a caregiving service / private social club similar to hospice home care to operate, give employees of such services immunity from certain laws, basically follow the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act, and let the situation evolve for another year. We need to realize that there's already a system in place.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Paul Edgar?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Paul Edgar. I really didn't have any desire to talk about this, but I'm worried more about the youth. And I know that kids who are exposed to marijuana earlier in as their brains grow and as they develop, test out less are facing a hard path. I wouldn't want this on any of your kids or grandkids or your friends or anyone. This is not appropriate. I applaud this effort for the moratorium. I had one concern, however, when I read the sample legislation that had been emailed out to me, and that was about this moratorium and how it might, in the wording, have some type of blanket effect. As an example, we have medical marijuana grow operations in Oregon City right now. They're legal. Is there anything about this legislation? And when I read it, I said, wow, this could affect these grow operations right now. This is, in a sense, a business situation. I don't condone it, but I was concerned in the reading of the sample legislation to find out whether or not it did that. But I would ask you to enact on this as fast as you can. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll just make a couple of comments. It wasn't presented at this one, but an example was given: legalization of alcohol and legalization of smoking. The issue, I agree, Mr. Edgar, is youth. People who are addicted to smoking usually have picked that habit up before they attain the age of adulthood, one that's very, very difficult to kick. And then there may be legal reasons why this couldn't have been done. If it is to be a controlled substance used for medical purposes, and maybe federal regulations would have prohibited it, maybe that's why it didn't occur. The pharmacy would seem to be the appropriate place to issue medicine, which would include marijuana, not special marijuana distribution sites. And maybe there's reasons why that couldn't happen, and maybe there's the same federal law reasons that exist and probably control pharmacies to some extent. I'm not questioning there are people that will medically benefit from marijuana. I am concerned with the fact that the setup that we have now, we had a report from our district attorney that there were a couple of one was a physician and another person was a person that could request for the permission to a person to get marijuana, that they had both issued about 3,000 in a year. I don't think there was a great deal of evaluation as to what their condition would be under those conditions. And my understanding is that permit will permit them to go ahead with getting a hold of the medical marijuana until some kind of board makes an evaluation, or a government body makes an evaluation whether it's valid or not. If it's determined invalid, that person can go to another physician and start the whole process over again. So the actual permission for people to get medical marijuana, it's not only the dispensaries that's an issue, I think it's the process of evaluating the need and the mechanism of permitting that need. With that, if anybody wants to go ahead and put forward a motion. I have nobody else on the floor. Yeah.
Well, I'll make a comment about medical marijuana dispensaries. I do believe that people can benefit from them. I believe that they should go through the pharmacy at Fred Meyer's. It should be regulated. They should have to dance to the same tune that every other drug has to dance to. So that's just the way that I feel about it. So with that, I would like to ask for the first reading. And Mr. Ed Sullivan, will you help me?
Yes, this is, you would move for first reading, introduction and first reading of a revised ordinance number 14-1005.
And declaring an emergency.
Right. So
moved.
Is there a second?
Is there a second?
Do you need to read the change into the record?
I'm going to do that after I read
Got
it.
it, okay.
But I need to have somebody second the motion
Somebody
to
has seconded.
Somebody has
introduce the
seconded.
resolution.
It's seconded.
Okay. This is ordinance number, I just lost it, I'm sorry. Okay, I got it back, I think. Ordinance number 14-1005, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City declaring a moratorium on medical marijuana facilities and declaring an emergency. And in this version, there is a new Section 6 term. The moratorium declared in Section 1 of this ordinance will continue until May 1, 2015.
Vote, please. Motion passes unanimously. Just for those in the audience today, usually we go through ordinances with a second reading. If we can do it in the first reading if we declare emergency, which is we would, and so this ordinance is now in effect.
No, you have to do a second
Twice,
reading.
yeah.
Oh, that's right, we have to do it
second.
today, but we have to do it today, excuse me.
So I will make a motion to move to have the second reading of ordinance number 14-1005
As revised for adoption.
and declare an emergency.
Right.
Second. Oh,
Okay, I
never
need to
mind.
read it again now.
Yep.
This is ordinance number 14-1005, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City declaring a moratorium on medical marijuana facilities and declaring an emergency. Section 6 is new in the version. Section 6, term. The moratorium declared in Section 1 of this ordinance will continue until May 1, 2015.
Again, it passes unanimously on the second reading.
And the recorder is instructed, I know, to inform the Health Division of the adoption.
It's effective immediately.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll proceed on to our public hearings. We have before us ordinance for introduction 14-1005 declaring, excuse me, going on, 13-1017 for introduction of adoption of the South End Concept Plan, implementing the zoning code, and I will first refer to Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor, evening commissioners. At our last meeting, we were reviewing the South End Concept Plan, the implementing zoning code aspect of that, and there was some concerns raised about reference to the most recent Dagami maps. Staff has went back and worked with the attorney and included in your ordinance Section 2 that states as part of its next code update program, the Oregon City Planning Staff shall evaluate and potentially recommend amendments to the Oregon City Municipal Code regarding the regulation of development on steep slopes or landslide areas. Oregon City Municipal Code 1744050, taking into account the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries landslide hazard and risk study of northwestern Clackamas County, Oregon, including the most current landslide and slope-specific building mapping, and the Oregon City Commission shall consider these same studies and maps along with the status of any code amendments prior to taking action on any request to annex lands within the South End concept planning area. So I think originally the concern was how would we address annexations in this area,
Yes.
knowing that there may be a delay in getting the implementing code. So through this ordinance, you'd have the ability to use those existing maps regardless of the status of the code adoption process for updating at a future date. I believe that was the one concern that was outstanding, and so I'd be happy to answer any questions. If not, recommend taking public testimony, and if so choose, make a decision on the first reading of the proposed ordinance.
I'll open the public testimony, and I have Tom O'Brien has signed up.
Mayor and Commissioners, thank you. My name is Tom O'Brien. I'm a resident of Oregon City, and I recognize that in approving the South End Concept Plan, you in all likelihood are going to pursue what Metro wants you to do. But I would like to remind you that you all have a legacy based upon your actions, based upon your actions this evening.
And I have a map here that I just want to stress once again the importance of your decision. There's an article in today's paper.
Yeah, I saw that.
Having to do, and it says locals ask their authorities if they are prepared for dealing with landslides. We have an area that when it comes up on the screen.
You got the wrong one up.
Well, that was what was here before. That is a concern to me and should be to you. It is not within the boundaries of the South End Concept Plan area, but it is an area that is going to be significantly impacted in our city based upon the level of development.
Well, we all want to talk about child abuse awareness.
I can make a
Write that number down.
Yes.
Don't forget to pick up your pinwheel in the back.
But what I wanted to point out to you is that right now we have a situation, the roadway on South End Road on the hill is deteriorating. The more traffic we put up and down that roadway, the faster it's going to reach a point of failure. We know it's an area that is susceptible to slides. In the last month and a half, the county has had crews out there on 2 separate occasions removing rock slides and debris that have fallen onto the roadway, restricting traffic down to 1 lane, taking alternate turns to get on that roadway area. There is one alternative to getting down that hill, and it's not a good one. You can go over Barker to Telford and down Center. We already know that in times of snow emergencies, we close that off. We simply don't have another route that can adequately take double today's traffic volume and get it to where it wants to go. So I'd like you to consider that in your decision-making process. So, thank you.
We have, I believe, do we have any other speakers?
Tom was all I thought.
Before then. Go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Paul Edgar. I've come before you on multiple occasions to talk about the South End Concept Plan. 2,600 to 2,900 dwelling units on the fringe of our city with virtually only one way in and one way out will result in trip generation from these dwelling units / houses with no transit options, which will physically exceed the capacity of the known and planned for transportation infrastructure with no options to solve the problem that will be created with this South End Concept Plan. Fact, R2, R3 dwelling units on the fringe of our city representing 54% of the developable land is unprecedented. We've never ever had that type of development ever offered or thought about at the fringe. And it's going to make annexations and the potential development of that land just about impossible. This is not what the marketplace wants and the marketplace needs. The recommendations are very simple, and I come back to eliminate all R2, R3 zoning identified on the 54% of the developable land and replace it with R6.5 zoning with 50-foot or 20-foot wide alleyways in the back, and R8 zoning would be best and consistent in the fringe area where we have limited transportation options. Create a new planned senior housing type zoning with incentives, maybe reductions in the SDC fees and permit fees as an incentive of that type of development. This is where the marketplace is, and there's a lot of people that want this, and they can't fit into 33-foot wide lots. Develop high-density housing alternatives and zoning closer to the core of the city where there is available transportation capacity and transit options, and where it can be done. This is right in line with Metro's Title 11, and it permits it. I'm just concerned that we're jumping ahead and we're doing something that's wrong, and common sense tells me that it's wrong, and I hope you people agree and think about the recommendation of going to a larger lot at that place. If you don't, this will be a problem for the next 20 years. This will be something that will be beaten down with every annexation vote. It will not win, and it will delay responsible development, and we want responsible development. We want a concept plan that is based in reasonableness, and I would gladly support it. Thank you.
I'd just like to comment that I agree with your statements that we need to concentrate the denser development on the corridors. The fact is that you can argue that's where the market is. We don't see it. We do not see any redevelopment to speak of along 7th Street corridor through Malala. That's not happening. We have to have some way of incentivizing it. I think that's where the density should go. I agree with you. The point is, I think you're quite right. The public probably is not going to support that development out there. But until we can demonstrate that we can, in fact, produce the denser development along those corridors, which we have not done, and I think we're going to have to incentivize it in some way. I think the pressure is going to be to maintain those kinds of densities. If that does not happen, and if you go to the kind of size acreages that we're used to having, the fact is that the pressure will be on to start doing concept plans for areas that are currently in our urban reserves and extend them very early on in the system and put pressure on the Beaver Creek community, which I don't want to see. But unless it can be demonstrated that we can deal with these traffic problems, that the city can do it, I think you're right. I think the annexations are going to fail in the public. I think that's going to be what occurs. Mm-hmm. But I think this is a mechanism to show that, in fact, we recognize that we need to confine our boundaries so that, in fact, we don't challenge our rural communities. It's still a form of urban sprawl, even though we've been able to slow it. The effect eventually will be the same unless we look for higher densities within our cities. And Commissioner Mumm.
Well, I think as everybody knows, are you waving about this one or the next one?
I'll have you on for the next one.
You want to speak? It's fine if you want to speak at this point, Christine.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to you. And you can speak twice.
You wanted the continuance.
You could probably go ahead.
Yeah, continue. That's right. We'll catch
Christine
up.
Kaczynski. I live on Holly Lane in unincorporated Clackamas County. I I don't know that the city really understood me when I was here last time. So I'm asking for a little bit more time tonight. I've taken the last 2 weeks to go through my archives, and I brought this information to you.
Go ahead.
I do not agree with the staff report of April 2nd, even though I really like Pete Walter. It states that the city will include language in the ordinance to assure that the most recent slope susceptibility mapping will be made part of the city code before any annexation. We were given these same assurances in the Park Place plan, but I don't believe that ever happened. When I testified to you last time, I made a statement that this was about a promise made to the people by the city, and that I felt that promise should be kept. This is the information that I feel that you need to understand what I said. On February 20th of 2007, an email was sent by the city engineer to the Park Place PAC, to the city business manager, the city planners, and the Park Place Neighborhood Association. The email stated, "I am absolutely serious about and committed to developing suitable geologic hazard requirements for the concept plan in Park Place. Oregon City's existing code, Chapter 17.44, is described. The engineer's email goes on to state, in an effort to improve our existing code, city staff has been working with Dogami to develop a plan to create a landslide hazard susceptibility map for Oregon City that would indicate areas of low, moderate, and high susceptibility to landslides. This would be used in conjunction with a revised code that uses the degree of landslide risk to guide the development requirements to assure that property is developed to reduce the potential for risk." On August 19th of 2007, a letter was sent to the Oregon City Planning Commission from the Park Place Neighborhood Association stating, "We are pleased to see that extensive work has been done revising the Oregon City Municipal Code on geologic hazards. We urge the city to complete the revision of the code and its approval by the City Commission before any annexation process of the area is initiated." On February 19th, 2008, I sent an email to the city engineer asking to be updated on proposed changes to the steep slope and landslide regulations, stating that we hoped these regulations would be in place prior to the adoption of the Park Place plan. I also included a sentence about the City of Salem's hazard landslide policy adopted in conjunction with FEMA. These regulations are considered to be the most comprehensive in the state, if not in the entire nation. And I've given some copies of this to Mayor Neely because I ran out of printer ink. I'm sorry. February 2008, I received an email from Pete Walter who advised the Geologic Hazards Code amendment is going back before the Planning Commission on March 28, 2008, and will be in place prior to any development taking place in the study area. I wonder why, then, the city approved the Park Place plan without attaching the yet-to-be-written finalized geologic hazard regulations and making them retroactive to become part of this concept plan. February 20th, 2008, the email from Pete Walter was followed by an email from the city engineer sent to me. These copies went to the City Commission and several other parties. In this email, the city engineer stated that the public should expect 2 stages of code changes that will govern geologic hazards. The city engineer went on to explain the second stage will be a rewrite of the Geologic Hazards Code to implement the new risk-based maps that Dogami is developing. We will be using the City of Salem's code as the template for our code. I agree that Salem's code will provide a very good model for us to use. Regarding the Dogami maps, I met with Bill Burns about 2 weeks ago, and he showed me the work that he has completed so far. We are preparing to provide an in-house review of the work he has completed. I ask, what happened here in 2008? The second stage of geologic hazards did not get written, and now 8 years later remain unwritten. Because there has been a lot of mention about the City of Salem hazard regulations, I'm giving you information about their graduated response table that they devised in March of 2009. I'm also giving you information extracted from the City of Salem's landslide regulations and graduated response table from July of 2000. I am further including the websites where these regulations and PDFs can be found. The City of Salem and Marion County initiated the development of their landslide hazard ordinances in 1996. Funding was secured from FEMA through Presidential Declaration for Disaster Funds. Funds were provided to the state through the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program administered by the OSP, Office of Emergency Management. DLCD and OEM provided technical support for the study and ordinance development, with FEMA funding 75% of the study and Dogami, Salem, and Marion County funding the remaining 25%. It's interesting to find that the City of Salem hazard regulations cites the City of Bend, where slopes in excess of as little as 10% are regulated. I am giving you a copy of page 5 of the GRI Geological Preliminary Study done for the Park Place Plan. I question why Oregon City's hazard regulations continue to regulate slopes greater than 25% when the recommendations from GRI clearly state we also recommend that the city require a geotechnical evaluation investigation as part of any future development in areas with slopes of 15% or steeper. I ask, why were the GRI recommendations not followed to regulate slopes of 15% or greater? The Holly Lane landslides occurred on slopes much less than 16%. The slides in the Street of Dreams in Clackamas County happened on slopes of 5% or less per Dogami. And the continuing landslides at the Newball Creek Apartments are occurring on slopes of minimal percentage. I therefore ask Oregon City, why are you only regulating slopes of 25% or greater when history has proven that landslides are occurring on slopes of minimal grade? To regulate only slopes of 25% or greater means that the city is being negligent in its duty to meet requirements of State Goal 7. I have presented the Commission with much necessary information, along with a plethora of reasons why the South End Concept Plan should not be approved tonight without attaching an ordinance to the plan, stating that the full and completely revised Oregon City Hazard Landslide Steep Slope Ordinances, as have been promised to your people since 2007, will apply to this plan. The ordinance will include both Stage 1 and Stage 2, as have been outlined in the above emails of 2007 and 2008, to include revised codes that will use the degree of landslide risk that will assign low, moderate, high areas of susceptibility. Once written, the entire revised ordinances should also apply to all future development taking place within the boundaries of the city. I encourage Oregon City to follow the suggestions outlined by your city engineer in 2008, suggesting that the City of Salem's code would be a good template for Oregon City to follow, since this is known to be the most comprehensive plan, where FEMA, DLCD, OEM, and DOGAMI were in partnership to help write these comprehensive regulations. I urge you to keep your promise to the people to see that these long overdue regulations are written to protect your people and your community. You do demand that your people pay their utility bills and property taxes on time. Therefore, shouldn't promises from the city be delivered to the people on time and not 7 years later? Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Mr. Conkle, I'm going to throw that ball into your court.
And the last code update that we did, we included the landslide susceptibility map regardless of the slope category.
Yeah.
So essentially we looked at historic landslides based on the LIDAR mapping that was the most recent data that we had available to us. And that's been included in our mapping. It's an overlaid district on all of our maps, so regardless of it's a 5% slope, a 10% slope, if it's a historic or ancient landslide, it's caught and it goes through the geologic hazards process. We did not adopt Salem's code. We did not do that. I think one of the difficulties you'd have is that, if we would want to do this citywide, and at the time of the last adoption, when we had a citywide code amendments being done, the work wasn't completed, and we adopted what was available at that time.
One other thing I would add, we just had a meeting yesterday with Christina and several people from the Holly Lane neighborhood with the county. There was 2 Metro staff there, 2 county staff there, and 3 city staff there to talk about the concerns of the Holly Lane neighborhood and street widening, landslides in general. And we heard from some of those neighbors that city just really wasn't listening to their concerns and hadn't been real responsive to that. And so I'm new to the code as well, and this particular code in particular, we came back and looked at it, and we have been very responsive to that. We've done code revisions, and we did it in 2009. I think our latest round is 2010. We're doing this one right now to adopt the new maps. We're familiar with the LIDAR. We use that information regularly. So, and we regulate slopes besides 25%. If it's within a known landslide or a slope that exceeds 25%, we've got buffer areas that go beyond that, oftentimes, which are flat, sloped areas. So, yes, we don't apply it to the hilltop for the most part, especially at the center of the city where there isn't a lot for slope and landslides. But when you look at the maps, Oregon City's got topography all the way around it, and when we're in those jurisdictions, or when the jurisdiction is within our authority to regulate, we have a very high standard to meet. And now I suspect there's instances when we're still going to struggle to regulate new development, but I just think we're hitting a pretty high standard, and we can always improve, and I think we do whenever we do that. Whenever we get tested with that, we listen to the public that comes before you, or you listen to the public that comes before you, and there's typically a reaction to that.
I recall, I can't recall the year, but it was when Bob Bailey was on the commission. Alice Norris was mayor, and I went out to see a development in the Park Place area, and there was this creation of this huge retaining wall that was there, and he came out with me, and then Alice Norris and Nancy Crusher at the time came out with me, and I believe there were code revisions that stemmed from that, and that would have probably been around 2009, 2010 when those revisions occurred. So I do believe we're responsive to these particular issues, and we're very sensitive to them. she brought out these promises from the engineer and so forth, and I'm just curious how they were addressed. And you may not know who the engineer was at this point.
This is the first I'm seeing it.
Yes.
Yeah. That was Nancy, and I think the result is the code that you have before you.
Yeah, I think so too. So I think there have been revisions subsequent to that time period.
Based on the dates of the emails that I was hearing, it looks to me like, 2009 and 2010 were a follow-up to that.
Right. I see Kathy Roth wishes to speak.
Well, you can see I've been writing a little bit here. Okay, I'd like to speak not only as a commissioner, but as an emergency management person and working in preparedness. We're addressing this tomorrow at a REMTech meeting, which meets at Metro, and that's the Regional Emergency Management Board, in light of what's happened in Oso, Washington. One of the meetings I had last week was with Jay Wilson, who Clackamas County Emergency Management, discussing what happened in Oso, and the footprint projected for the slide that happened there was 100 and, let's see, let me get my things right here, 160 feet. The actual footprint at this point is 630 feet, which tells me you can't say what Mother Nature is going to do. You just can't take a LiDAR map, say this is the toe and this is where it's going to stay within this boundary. You can't do that. It's like looking at the footprint up here at Waterboard Park. The footprint, the toe of the footprint comes right below, I'm sorry, Joan, I'm looking. The toe of the footprint comes right behind the Armory building there. There's nothing saying that that's going to stop there. That's the beginning of this new slide. So what happened in projecting that 160-foot slide footprint allowed development in those areas. And I believe that we don't have any business allowing something like that to be developed anywhere near us. Our geography of our lands, the soils is very similar. We have global warming going on, which we're going to be having many more deluges with rain, that kind of stuff. It's going to affect the soils that we've got around here. We can't outsmart or outrun nature, and to allow such development in such an area at the density proposed is unconscionable. We have no foreseeable funding for alternate transportation routes, and our current route is failing at a very rapid rate. I would say with what's happening in just the last few months, that's a rapid rate. No matter how good a plan looks on paper, the real test is on the ground or in the ground. We have extensive experience in landslides within the Oregon City geographic area, and we don't want to make another mistake. All of the area that was developed out on Holcomb that we had the slides on, I drove past that every day and watched the stuff going. Lived across the street from the houses on Newell Ridge that went over the edge. I don't care to see that kind of stuff happening again, and having a whole developed community of people densely packed up there on top of the hill and no way in or out. And we're not only talking about landslides caused from rain and that type of soil failure, we're talking about earthquake. An earthquake could just totally devastate all of the routes in and out of that area very quickly, since we've only got two. Okay, that's my emergency management speech.
Mr. Moon.
Well, thank you for Kathy for that. As you probably all know, I've voted against this because of traffic. I do feel that the steep slopes and the zone issues will be addressed. I still maintain that we have to offer our citizens a variety of housing abilities. They need to have apartments, they need to have senior living, they need to have, but I don't want to put all my seniors, I don't want to tell all the seniors they have to move to South End, area. So I think you have to offer a variety of those. But the transportation has always been my issue with this. And I've made that very clear at almost every meeting we have with this. but I do believe that the slopes can be addressed, and the zoning will be addressed. And I believe that, just like Park Place, the annexations will go down until those things happen. So I'm okay with this part of it.
Mr. Pauly.
Yes, the South End concept plan is very lengthy. I do recall, let me know if I'm correct in this, that there is a geological overlay of the geological hazards included in that.
Correct. When we started this, we utilized all of our natural resource overlay district, our steep slopes, our landslide maps, to essentially start netting out land that it's not even considered in the density calculation. Those areas were taken out. They were identified on essentially your base layer, which is how we started. Yes. So those were utilized.
These maps will be provided at the time any kind of development comes forward, and the public will have access to those maps as any kinds of subdivisions are putting forward. I don't liken the area that we're talking about to Newell Creek Canyon at all. I don't think they're the same kind of Troutdale formations that we saw there on Newell Creek Canyon. We've got nothing I can see where we're having to build out. As I said, I drove that whole area anywhere near areas that are extremely steep, and I think that the city is probably among the strongest in the region in terms of its steep slopes ordinances. In any case, this is an ordinance that is adopting the zoning, and it's not the ordinance that's accepting the plan. I'll entertain a motion for a reading if anyone wants to put one forward. Commissioner Pauly, excuse me, did you get to speak?
I did.
Yeah, we got a green thing again, so that's on the other. I don't know how that happens. That's on the agenda portion. It's gone now.
I will move for the continuance of the second reading of ordinance number 13.
No,
This is the first reading.
Yeah,
the first reading. Excuse me.
We're not continuing it, I don't think.
no.
Unless you're moving
Okay.
it.
13, 10, 17.
Yeah, that's the other ordinance.
Excuse me. Ordinance number 13-1017 for introduction, adoption of South End concept plan, implementing zoning code.
I hear a second.
Second.
This is ordinance number 13-1017, an ordinance adopting revisions to the Oregon City Municipal Code to implement the South End Concept Plan.
Okay, 4 yeses and 1 no. With that, we'll go ahead and proceed on. And this is the adoption for the second reading for the adoption of no. We're asking for a continuance, excuse me, on this. I got to just take a look here. We're going into general business, and we're looking for a continuance of the second reading of 13-1016 South End Concept Planning, amending the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. I think it's being recommended for continuance again. Is that correct?
Correct. We'd like to try and adopt.
We
both
will
on the
open
same
the
night.
public hearing and we will not be taking action on this tonight. Christine, you use up your 6 minutes, but you can come up again if you want to.
Briefly, I don't have anything written. Christine Kaczynski, Holly Lane. My concern is that I've worked on some land uses here in Oregon City, and I can see homes. One home is close to approval. That's right inside of a landslide. When your city codes clearly state that development must be 200 feet away from the crest or the toe of a landslide. I've also studied many of the areas off of Central Point, Leland area, and there's been many, many homes that I could show you that have been built right on the side of a landslide. So that's why I question why, what's happening. As a citizen, I don't see what goes on in the planning department. All I see is a problem, and why do these things get approved when you feel you have great regulations? The reason I talked about the city of Salem is that FEMA put a great deal of money into the regulations there. And according to Scott Burns and Bill Burns, these were the best. And your city engineer at the time felt that it would be easy for those guidelines to come over to the city because they were and still are the most comprehensive. I probably need to take another look at your current landslide regulations. I don't see in there where you are regulating areas of low, moderate to high risk. When you look at the city of Salem's code, a couple of the pages that I gave to Mayor Neely show a scale. Areas are given points, and if the points add up to 6, by gosh, you're going to get a geotech review. If they add up to 2, no review will be needed. So their entire city is graded. There's no question. And so that was my reason for bringing that out. And I do get concerned when development is approved, when I can clearly see a mile-wide landslide right underneath of this home. And I need to tell you that recently I have been talking with the Northwest Insurance Council in Washington, who has worked with the people in Oso. The reason I did that is because I'm going to prove to you that people cannot obtain landslide insurance. We all know that it's not part of the homeowner's insurance. It's special insurance. It will not be written by any company if you are in a landslide zone. They won't even write insurance for the contents of your home, so you are left with nothing. So when I get the proof, I will give it to you, but I feel bad when I see things approved and I can see a problem, and I know that when you say you approve this concept plan, at some point it's going to come up for annexation. If the annexation goes through, after you go through your zoning and your other steps, building permits come. So when a developer comes in and gets building permits, he must sign a waiver that clears the city from liability. The developer now is carrying the liability for landslides, and his insurance that he's carrying is probably not strong enough to even cover a huge landslide. These are all issues that the homeowners are faced with. So the people on Holly Lane and other areas, they're scared stiff. People where I live have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. People have divorced over these issues. People have gone bankrupt. So when you talk about developing a concept plan with a lot of homes, enlarging a street, widening a street, you're going to have a lot of jackhammers, a lot of grading. What's going to happen? One of the things that came out from Oso, Washington, is that 2 days before the landslide, there was a 1.1 earthquake in that area. They're now studying that to see if that was a setup for the landslide, of course, along with the heavy rains. So, you know, there's just a real mix, but I'm just here to tell you the emotions that exist on my street and other streets, like the South End plan, where people are seeing parts of their street move. My husband just came in the other day and said, honey, you know that little quarter-acre piece on the back of our lot? It's sliding to the right and it's sliding to the left. And I want to remind you that we live on what you call a flat lot. We don't have a slope, but our land is moving and it's creeping toward the canyon, and it will eventually reclaim that land. So thank you for letting me talk. Thank you.
I'd repeat, I think the soils conditions there are quite a bit different. Those are the areas of the Troutdale Formation.
I think the one part here that is difficult is we have this great community that was formed 100 and some years ago, and essentially they took 50 by 100 lots and slapped it down regardless of slope, cliff, stream.
That's right.
And those are what we refer to as lots of record. They exist. They've been platted. They're recorded. And I would have loved if we would have had these regulations in place when that happened, or in 1930, or 1940, or 1950. And we could have avoided a lot of this. So we're somewhat reactionary in that anything moving forward, we're going to be able to address through the land use process. But when you have existing lots of record, you essentially end up in a takings situation. If you have a lot that exists, and we come in and say this lot was created in 1920, and we come in and say we've adopted this regulation, and you can't do anything with it. So we need to be prepared to buy it, and that's the unfortunate truth about the regulatory concept here. And I think Mr. Sullivan can probably talk a little bit about the takings, and we saw a little bit of that with Measure 7, Measure 37, and so it's difficult. It really, really is, especially on lots that exist. Moving forward, especially in this concept plan area where you're going to need to come in through a land use process to do a subdivision or a partition or a master plan, you have regulations in place. We have technology provided to us now that didn't exist before. We have several lots like around Waterboard Park that were platted decades ago.
Yeah.
And it is difficult.
Tony, can I ask you again? I know you said this earlier, but when was the current code adopted for hazardous slopes?
I was trying to find. We adopted a couple, and it looks like it was updated in ordinance in 08, on an ordinance in 09, and an ordinance in 2010. So
okay. Do you know what it was previous to 08?
80.
It was called
I'd have to go back. It's not in here. But
I checked it the other day.
Well,
It was called the Unstable Slope Code in 1982, and it was pretty. It wasn't as extensive as this, but there was one.
You brought on Central Point. I know there were areas that were already annexed and platted. When I first came on the commission, there was one that you had Central Point went way out with a lot of unannexed land, and then there was one piece right before it drops off that was actually annexed into the city. We don't do that anymore. But I think some of those areas you were talking about precede these more recent codes, and I don't think it could happen there. But so.
I'd like to move to continue the second reading of ordinance number 13-1016.
Second.
And that's to April 16, right?
To April 16th.
Correct.
Moved and seconded. Unanimous consent on the continuance. With that, we'll go into the Heritage Tree nomination for Sugar Maple Tree on 715 5th Street. I'm glad to see these are beginning to move in.
Mayor, we don't need I think this is all in your packet, and it's been
Yes.
well documented, so
Yes.
it's probably a very accelerated presentation we need to make, just to let you know that we're ready to roll.
I believe you're correct.
I don't think these gentlemen run into much problem.
Yeah, you have a packet with photos and unanimous recommendation from the Natural Resources Committee to nominate this tree. The property is owned by Judge Ronald Tom, and the nominator is Dee Dee Dalsrud. It's a sugar maple, and it is a very prominent tree. It met all the criteria for nomination, and we were very happy to provide this recommendation from the NRC.
And if you haven't seen it, go in the early fall. It's
Yeah.
magnificent.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful
Can
tree.
you answer, was there any looking done at the health of the tree?
I know it's been taken care of over the years. It has some spas and guys holding it together so that some of the branches can be stabilized, but it's relatively healthy according to Judge Tom and Dee Dee Dalsrud. Clearly quite vigorous from the photos that we have. Has dropped limbs on the property, but not in the street. So it's an older tree, and it has some of those issues the older tree does. But it's quite a vigorous older specimen, and part of the application is, you're accepting full responsibility for the maintenance of that tree and willing to have it treated at your own expense if you are, if you are nominated, and that's part of the covenant. That protects the tree as once it's designated is in the event of a determination of hazard by a certified arborist, then there can be steps taken to remove the designation so that any hazard can be alleviated.
I stand under that tree every morning.
Yeah.
And not just for the heck of it,
Yeah.
But there's always branches, and I'm always picking up stuff off the street, actually.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of wondering about the health of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that it drops all its leaves in a very short amount of time too. So
That's not a problem.
They have leaf fights apparently.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Move to approve 14-196 Heritage Tree nomination for sugar maple tree at 715 Fifth Street.
Moved by Commissioner Mumma, seconded by Commissioner Roth. The vote, please. Unanimous vote. Thank you. Move the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
A second. Oh, I was too late.
Okay, it was moved. It was moved by Commissioner Mumma, again by Commissioner Roth. And again, a unanimous decision. And now we'll go to the city manager's report, and I think it'll require some action on our.
Yes, Your Honor. The first item I want to talk to the commission about tonight is about a week ago you all received a letter from Clackamas County Commissioner Clackamas County Administrator Don Krupp requesting that the city waive its right-of-way fee with respect to the Tri-City Sewer Service District, or in the alternative to reduce the fee to the minimum annual fee of $15,000 that otherwise wouldn't apply. I know you've spoken to legal counsel about this request in executive session, and I just want to confirm with the commission whether there are any of you that want us to place this item on the agenda, the request as an action item. And if there aren't any, then I will prepare a response back with the advice of legal counsel.
Do we need a motion or anything?
I don't think so.
No, if there's nobody to ask for it to be put on the agenda, then.
Okay.
The other item that you discussed was the whether it would be prudent to, or just sort of a gesture of good faith to the county, for the city to designate the portions of that fund, those revenues from Tri-City toward your rather substantial sewer repair obligations that you have in your current collection system. Those repairs would help the Tri-City Sewer Service District with both inflow and infiltration. It would help all the members of the district, including Gladstone and West Lynn, have a more efficient operating system. And who knows, they might even be inspired to follow our lead and start fixing some of their issues as well. As you know, our sewer problems vastly exceed the estimated $191,000 in revenue that would be received by this fee. And by vastly, I mean, just add the digits.
Well, it would be a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. So anyway, we do have a draft resolution in front of you that we're recommending that you adopt, and I think the city attorney, it's a rather short resolution, but I think the city attorney might have some comments about it, and then...
No comments, it's within your policy range.
I don't think we have an ordinance.
Yeah, where is
before
that?
us.
No, it's a resolution.
It's right here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
I'm like,
Yeah, it's coming around. We saw an example, we
did
actually
see
saw
an-
it in executive session.
Yeah.
And we're bringing it out of executive session for discussion at the next meeting. This right-of-way ordinance is, in my opinion, a rent. It doesn't dictate where the monies go to. In some cities, there's a purchase. I think in Lake Oswego, Tigard purchased the permission from West Lynn to run a water line through their system at the cost. Well, in any case, it cost them $5 million. So it was a memorandum of understanding, not quite the same thing we have in right-of-way ordinance, but basically that was analogous to, may I do that? Sure. Yeah, and it's analogous to a purchase. What we have here is analogous to a rental. We're renting the space for you to, for the entity that is wishing to have the right-of-way, we're renting them the right to do that. These funds come into our general fund. They are then distributed among the various departments. We've got a right-of-way ordinance the right-of-way ordinance applies to the city utilities as well. We dealt with them earlier as franchise fees, and they've come into the general fund and they are redistributed.
Mayor, might I comment on one thing? I did, when I spoke to the county administrator before he actually sent me this letter, I explained to him that the difficulty, or the challenge, if you will, because he had let me know that he was going to be sending this, and I encouraged him. I said, think about the challenge, because the challenge for you in asking to be treated differently than every other utility user in the right-of-way, and we now are up to more than 21 different utility users, and when we started this project, we knew of 5. So the project has been extremely successful in capturing and identifying users in your right-of-way that were previously not paying any rates back to the taxpayers for the use of that very important public asset. And I said to the administrator, I suggested, the challenge the city commission will face in offering you some sort of exemption or special treatment will be to distinguish your Tri-City Sewer Service District from the city's own water and sewer utilities, not to mention CRW and South Fork and all of the others that are out there. And what I think is peculiar about the request is there isn't anything that addresses that at all. So that's maybe because it's difficult to do. I think it is very difficult to distinguish those utilities, but I just wanted to offer that.
Let me just read the last item here on the resolution, because the public probably is not seeing this at all. Now therefore, Oregon City resolves to direct city staff to expend Tri-City Sewer District right-of-way revenues for maintenance improvements to the city's water collection system within the city's right-of-way that directly or indirectly benefit the Tri-City Sewer Service District. The fact is, we're going to have to expend money for that anyway. Many of these sewer systems are approaching failure, and we've seen that actually in some of the claims that we've seen coming against the city in terms of damage that has resulted from problems from the sewer system. I'll vote on this resolution, but it doesn't have a whole lot of meaning because let's say we got enough money that we could fix all our sewer problems, we'd still be charging them right away. That doesn't change. And it's going to be the Budget Committee and the City Commission of subsequent commissions when they when they do their 2-year budget cycle to indicate where those monies are going to go. And this money is coming into our general fund. It's going to be dispersed in any case. I think this is simply, on my part, a recognition of our sewer system has a need that we can address, and one of the ways we can address it is from monies that we collect from our right-of-way fees. It's going to be in a common pot. It's not like we say, well, this piece of income is going to go to this piece of payment. It doesn't operate that way. It comes into our general fund, and then we distribute it out of our general fund to the various projects. So the fact that we probably got more needs money-wise to fix our sewer system that's going to come in from this particular right-of-way, those monies are going to be used. So I think it's a gesture on our part in terms of how that money can be used, and I'll probably vote for the resolution, but it does not tie our right-of-way, any of our right-of-ways, to any specific use. That's a decision of subsequent commissions.
Do we need a vote on the?
I need a motion.
Yep.
Okay.
I move to approve resolution number 14-05, a resolution expanding the right-of-way fees to benefit the city's wastewater collection system and the Tri-City Sewer Service District.
And I will second.
And it is done, and the vote is being taken. Unanimous vote on the resolution. Yeah.
Okay, Mayor. Also, we've been talking a lot tonight about landslides, so very briefly, I'm going to ask Scott Archer to give you a very quick update about Waterboard Park.
Oh, good. Yeah.
The status is that we are working on reviewing the issues there. We've had a couple of on-site meetings with key folks. John Lewis's staff have been engaged in the process as well. We are working with a geotechnical engineer to help us evaluate what some of the significant issues that we're dealing with are and make some recommendations. We're doing this as rapidly as is possible. We know there's a lot of interest. I get a lot of communication from our community members that are interested in what's going on. So we're working as quickly as is possible. The goal is that we do want to have the park available to the public. That's what our intent is. We're just trying to do that in the appropriate manner and make sure that we're taking the appropriate measures to make sure that we can, to the extent that's possible in this type of a park with this type of terrain, to protect the safety of our residents, but also to address the city's liability issues. So as soon as we have additional information, we'll keep you posted, and we're doing as quickly as we can do, trying to get that situation assessed.
Could you just take a moment to specifically state what the specific reasons were to close the trail when we did?
Sure. It was a little bit of a kind of a quick decision. There was a specific incident with a large boulder that rolled through from up above the trail, went across the trail and went down below, and that was part of it. The other part of it is just in terms of the issue of the deterioration of the old roadway, which is considered our pathway in the park, has deteriorated rapidly to the point where we know that it's not maintained at the level that a normal walking path would be maintained, and I don't think that's our intent, because quite frankly it wouldn't be a good investment to do that. So we're assessing also kind of the condition there and what measures we could take to do a better job of warning people of the issues with that, so that they don't expect it, that they're just going to go, maybe if somebody's biking down that and kind of just hit a 2 or 3 foot drop off all of a sudden or something like that. So the conditions have changed rapidly in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, and everything kind of just came to a point where we assessed that with our risk management representative, I guess is the right term, from our insurance company. They made a recommendation that we take the action that we did. that's intended to be a short-term action, and we're taking those steps to make the park accessible to the public, available to the public.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What triggered that question specifically, I was asked at an Optus meeting by a former, several years ago, member of the Planning Commission, and he saw a clip of, he was in Bend, he saw a clip in the news about that area, and somehow he had heard that somebody actually got hit by a boulder, and I said, I don't think this is triggered by any accident that actually occurred to anybody.
No.
That it was, things were changing rapidly, and I think
that's correct. No, to our knowledge, we've had no such incident. We're trying to avoid that type of thing.
Right.
That's probably, just some kind of rumor thing or something.
In that context, I'd like him to thank the police department for, I brought up the concern about some people living in the park, and they went in and did a sweep, and I guess they found one person, but yeah, so I'd like to thank you for that.
Next, we have John Lewis. He's going to give you a couple of updates on transportation issues.
So thank you very much. Just real quickly, wanted to let you know about a couple of things that actually Commissioner Mumm and Doug Naylor are going to be involved with tomorrow, and they're playing out further in front of the Metro Joint Policy Advisory Group meeting on next week, which is the 10th. And then there's another meeting on the 11th. It's all related to transportation. I thought they were important issues. One is, and this, Betty brought this up a few weeks ago, this Transportation for America. It's really efforts by others to influence Congress, Metro in particular, for improved federal funding for transportation dollars. Essentially, the transportation funding at the federal level is essentially broke. So there's been a couple letters that have gone to Congress, and Metro's planning to pass a resolution that will recommend some form of increased revenue, and they've listed several alternatives. But just wanting you to know, ODOT also, Matt Garrett, their director, wrote a letter as well, and so I think tomorrow at the counties, the Metro
C4 subcommittee.
Metro subcommittee. So they'll be asking you for your support and to acknowledge that you've talked to your our elected body, or that I've talked to them, and that we've kind of shared that information with you, and they're going to ask you to support that.
Yeah, we talked about that and we endorsed that.
So I wanted to bring that up. The other thing I wanted to make you aware of is Metro. I got this on my home email, so I'm not sure where they get all their email addresses, but Metro's been sending out requests that we fill out on a couple of online surveys, and the website's www.makeagreatplace.org, and it's got to do with this Climate Smart Communities program that they've been talking about for seems like about a year now. The regional transportation plan update, it's all part of that public involvement plan. So if I'm actually on all these issues, I'm actually crafting an email because I knew I didn't have enough information. I'm just going to ship that to you and make sure you have the links and the information so you can take a quick look at that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is part if we don't see better funding, there's actually some of the projects that we weren't real successful at getting, but some of those that were successful at getting funding, they're on a list to be done. That list is likely to get much shorter if Oregon doesn't see funding from a federal level. So it's going to hit locally real quickly here if we don't see some change. So it's a good reason to support that. Just a couple other things. I know Clackamas County has its community survey right now, so they're asking for your input about what we want to see in terms of the county. And then while I was on that website, I noticed that Commissioner Paul Savas is now the commissioner who's assigned to our area, and so
I've sent emails on this. Okay,
there you go. That's it.
That was good.
We didn't talk, and I know he covered things that I've already emailed you about, but that's okay. So also, you remember at your last meeting, someone raised the question of whether the land use proceedings regarding the Willamette Falls Legacy Project should be a type 3 or type 4 decision, whether they were quasi-judicial or a policy matter.
Yeah.
The city attorney has drafted a memo, and I'm going to read a line from the last paragraph, the conclusion, which essentially says that overall these decisions are more quasi-judicial in character than they would be as a factual situation rather than procedural. And so I'm going to pass out this memo, and please let me know.
It's already done.
You've already got it?
Don't get passed out.
Okay,
Everybody's got it.
good. I've got extra copies then.
Okay.
So then last but not least, as you know, your code currently doesn't authorize the city to regulate trees on private property.
Yes.
And I want you to be aware that while you don't have that in place, there is some risk that larger parcels in the community could be clear-cut. Parcels of land that maybe were grown originally for some other purpose, but now have timber value. And I suspect that we have risk that some of that kind of clear-cutting could happen if we don't have regulations that cover private property trees. And by the way, even if you did have those regulations, you'd have to be careful about how you wrote them, because if you don't allow some harvesting, then it would be a taking. So you have to be careful that your regulations would allow some of the trees to remain so that you don't have just a denuded area. But right now, you don't even have that. So if you wanted us to work on that, I think we have a very full plate, but I could ask our planning department to begin looking at that if you're interested. If you're not, I just want you to be aware that you do have risk that some of these larger areas that have old growth timber on them could be clear cut.
Well, I can say about that, I don't want to tap into personal property. I mean, they bought the property. We hope they do the right thing.
Yep.
So I don't know. How do you
It's
feel?
totally a commission decision. Sometimes commissions regret that when they don't do something, and I just thought it was important for me to let you know. It's not my prerogative to suggest whether you do or you don't.
Have anything pending?
I suspect probably. I wouldn't be bringing this to your attention if I hadn't heard some rumors that there could be some of that activity happening. And I asked our planning department, do we have anything to at least cause not clear cutting, but thoughtful cutting and thinning and that kind of thing, so that there would be some canopy left? And we do not have anything right now on private property that would give you any restrictions. So
I guess I got a specific question, Mr. Conkle. I thought I forget the title for Upland, I thought that if somebody had actually clear cut an area and then wanted to bring it for parcelization, that there was in fact a time limit between the time they did that cutting?
Yes.
I don't believe so.
I was almost sure we had that.
I can check.
Yeah, check it. I think we do have some
Is
protection.
it
there.
something
I remember
already
talking
in?
about that.
Well, is it already a project that
I don't think it's in yet, is it? It did come in?
the property is already in?
Our tree protection language, 1741, is related to a development application. So if someone came in for building a new building in a commercial zone or a new subdivision, that's when those regulations are applied. If you have a property and all you want to do is cut it, and you're not in a natural resource overlay district, you're not on a steep slopes, that section is not applicable because we don't consider it development.
So there's no permit needed to cut down a tree?
No, I know that, but wasn't there a time period after which they cut the trees that they could not bring it in for development?
Yes, I remember
I'd
that
have to look.
discussion.
I think we do have some.
I don't suspect this is to cut it down and develop it. I think this is to cut it down for the harvest value of the timber.
Yeah, well,
And so the stumps, or some people like stumps.
no, I can understand the concern, but if they had that as timberland that has come into the city, they had some kind of expectation of value, and I see our attorneys thinking so.
Well, I did an article about the Forest Practices Act a couple of years ago, and there's a very peculiar law that says basically counties can't regulate forest practices. It's only the prerogative of the Board of Forestry and its regulations. Cities can, in limited circumstances, and it's been 2 years since I wrote this thing, but there is a statute, and I could locate it fairly easily, that does give some limited ability for cities to regulate land within its boundaries. And I don't recall that we ever actually acted on the issue of, well, suppose somebody comes in after harvesting, can we do anything about it? I don't think we ever did.
Well,
Again,
I just
we can
wanted to
look
bring
at
it to your attention because when that happens, some people are going to be alarmed, and I wanted to make sure that you knew in advance, so there were no surprises.
I understand that, and I guess
We have plenty to do.
I love forests, I love trees and so forth, but
Yeah.
especially given some of the regulations that we have on our national forests and so forth, and the fact that it is under private ownership, I'm reluctant to do a whole lot about that. I'd be more, I mean, if we're going to do something, I'd be more interested in developing a program. Marcia Sinclair now works with Metro at the zoo, was very much involved in the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council, made some very strong recommendations, and this was in terms of existing households where you have a couple of natural areas, but you have a houses built in between to encourage the planting of trees that are consistent with the two corridors. Birds can move in between and so forth. I prefer an incentive program of some sort as opposed to
Regulating.
regulating the trees that aren't even.
We don't have any program even in our heads. You could design whatever, any program you wanted to. You could have a work session on it, talk about it. I just didn't want it to happen without you knowing that you don't have.
Well, I'm going to suggest that at one
authority.
point we invite Marcia Sinclair to speak to in a study session about a plan, an actual concept plan that I think both the Environmental Learning Center and the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council put forward.
There are homeowner associations, though, that have regulations and
By
standards for
CCNRs.
that and processes.
Yep.
So that's one way of doing it.
That's all I had to see.
Okay. I'd like to announce a couple of appointments and one that is likely to be made. This is announcement of the reappointment of Derek Metzen for the architectural position for the term on the Natural Resource Committee, not the Natural Resource Committee, to the Historic Review Board, term going from January 2014 to December 31st, 2016. The next one is actually a chamber appointment that we automatically approve because they have a seat, and it is Jonathan Stone to fill the vacancy of the Chamber of Commerce representative from terms April 2nd, 2014 to December 31st, 2014, filling a open position for the chamber. Even though it's a chamber appointment, he came in for an interview, and it turns out we have a mandatory architectural position on there. But Jonathan Storm, part of his background is he is also got a degree in architecture. Am I right?
Oh.
So we have two architects on the Natural, I'm going to do it again, on the Historic Review Board.
That's great.
To those that don't know, there are two bodies besides the City Commission that actually are actually governing bodies, and one's the Planning Commission and the other is the Historic Review Board. Any actions they can take, the City Commission can call them out on their own, or they can be appealed to the City Commission, but absent that, decisions made by the Planning Commission, well, not all decisions, but many of the decisions made by the Planning Commission and the Natural Resource, and I'm doing it again, Historic Review Board, those two, in fact, I guess have authority of law in a sense, that can be appealed to the City Commission. We also have a position that will be coming forward in an interview that I won't be able to attend, and that's from the for the Parks and Recreation Committee. I've asked them to go ahead with the interview, and I will probably approve it. We have a special position on the Parks and Recreation Advisory PRAC committee that is an individual that is served by the senior facility. In other words, the Pioneer Community Center. We had one applicant, but that applicant would have had to recuse himself from any decisions regarding the senior citizen because he drove a bit for the senior center, was paid some salary, and he also had a church and rented the space, and that put him in a very peculiar position. And I came to the decision that I could not appoint him. He could, of course, conflict of interest on any decisions involving the senior center when the purpose of that position is to have somebody representing the senior center, and there is an applicant, and I've requested Mr. Archer to go ahead and have the I can't be there, but have the PRAC go ahead and do the interview, and more than likely I will accept any recommendations they put forward. Normally I sit in all the interviews. With that, I'll start from. Should I start from my left?
Sure. I think that's kind of your pattern, so we'll keep on there. But my voice may not last much longer, so we will start. The TriMet board meeting was held in our very home Oregon City up at Clackamas Community College, and Mayor Neely and myself attended, and we actually had the opportunity to get up and speak on behalf of Oregon City and our needs and our concerns about transportation and TriMet service, specifically in Oregon City. And we used all of our time plus more talking about the needs of Oregon City and the fact that we've had lines cut while our population has more than doubled. So that was good to get that message right to the board of directors in a unified way. I think they got the message. We had Mayor Neely put the map on the screen of the overhead of our service district, and it's so obvious on the map. Is that the right one? Yes. How little of Oregon City is served. so little. And so that was great. And then I did stay afterwards. A lot of people left, but there were many comments from citizens and TriMet writers about their needs and what they would like to see. And then after they all filed out, the board of directors mentioned some things in the work, like an e-ticket, where you would actually it would accumulate credit instead of losing that pass after the time limit. The amount that you didn't use would stay on there, and you could reuse that. So I thought that was great, but I'm excited that they are doing a research and engaging public, and this is our time to speak up now and look out for our citizens and see if there's something we can do through TriMet. If not, we need to make sure that our citizens get transportation in the city. Mm-hmm. And that's all I have. Just remember, it's Child Abuse Protection Month.
Okay. Mr. Mum.
Okay, so I was thinking about this when I heard about on the news. For the second time, there was a drunk driver in Portland that drove into the Max Tunnel, thinking it was, what was it, Ed?
It was.
Yeah. So I'm thinking as I'm driving down the street, what about our elevator? Do you think anybody could be drunk enough to drive into?
They got those two posts. I don't think they can get by them.
But there's very small cars these days.
Yeah, that's true.
That was a concern, actually, I heard from a citizen when we were doing that work, whether or not that could happen.
Oh.
And I think that's one of the reasons you see those two big posts there.
Yeah, but we've got very small cars that could squeeze through there. So
well, a drunk driver would be pretty skillful to get through into it.
And also, Oregon City Chamber teamed up with the neighborhood associations, the CIC, and they did a Jeopardy game on March 20th, and I have bragging rights because my team won. Tom O'Brien was on this team, so he has bragging rights too. But it was really a lot of fun. It was a good way for our businesses to interact with our citizens, and all of the Jeopardy questions were Rocky, I'm glad, didn't show up because he probably would be on my team and he'd have all the answers. But it was really great that they put that together. So.
My team didn't win, but I did want to mention two things. One was that I'm the one that got out the name of our newest neighborhood association. I beat Betty out on that one.
Yes, you did.
We lost in that. What was it? What do you call it? The final question.
The final Jeopardy.
The final Jeopardy, and we were. I think we might have been the highest at that point, and then we blew it. But when they were counting off to put people on the various teams, John Lewis was number one, and they were hit me as number one. I immediately shifted off it because I didn't want to be on the same team as John Lewis, which was the only team that got a negative score.
Yeah.
So it was a good decision on my part.
It was a great decision.
A negative score.
But it was a lot of fun, I have to tell you.
That was not nice.
It's late. I'm not nice when it's late.
That's all I have.
Let's see, a couple things. I just wanted to mention a couple things about the trip that I was on with the high school choir. We were in Ireland for spring break, and the students, there was about 35 of us in the entire group, about a little over 20-some students who represented Oregon City very, very well, and sang all over Ireland at various cathedrals and public sites. Was really a cool experience for those students and for those of us that was traveling with them. We were in one public building, kind of just on the outskirts of Dublin, and the city essentially hosted several choirs that were able to sing an adult group of special needs singers, where music has really been a powerful way to help them in their lives. Another choir was an amazing group of elementary school kids. So it was a really cool event. I got to talk to one of the city commissioners. In Dublin, they have commissioners that represent each area of the city, so they have 50 some of them. So I imagine that's
Nancy's like, whoa.
Yeah, I imagine that's very interesting. But they're doing a lot of redevelopment and various things, so we got to talk a little bit about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is the Oregon Ghost Conference, which is next weekend at the Pioneer Community Center, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is the third year we've done this Oregon Ghost Conference. Oregon City is known to be a fairly haunted historic place, and we will be taking hundreds of people through the city on tours. We have guest speakers coming from all over the Pacific Northwest and the entire west coast of the United States. I know of at least 200 or 300 people that we know are coming. That doesn't count the general public or anyone else. It's going to be a big event, and we have events at various locations throughout the city all weekend long, and we have other other Oregon cities coming, representing various parts of Oregon and Washington, one of which is St. Helens, Oregon, which does an annual Halloween festival and have really turned their haunted history into a generator of income for the city and bringing tourism into the city. Port Gamble, Washington also has done the same thing, and it's an amazing town, a company-owned town where all the buildings are still owned by the company and rented out. It almost looks like a movie set because all the buildings are late 1800s and are just, well maintained and beautiful. So they'll be representing that city. Let's see what else. We have authors, several authors, and reality TV show personalities and stars coming as well. So there'll be a lot of people in Oregon City learning about our history and our folklore and little ghost stories as well. So this should be fun.
Yeah.
And if you want information, OregonGhostConference.com.
With that, meeting is adjourned.
Did you get to